Good evening and welcome again to yet another insightful learning session from Digital Excellence Pharma Academy, which is the joint initiative of CredoWeb and Medicine Man to enable pharma professionals to gain the insights as well as the knowledge from industry thought leaders both from India and abroad. So, today evening, we have a wonderful session where Deep Bandari will share the preview of CredoWeb and Medicine Man's research project, where we are planning to bring in a whole lot of insights as to what's really happening within the Indian pharma given the COVID-19 crisis and what are the challenges they are facing in adapting digital in their organizations. So we've had excellent response so far from the field force as well as from the C-suite and the people in between. So Deep will be sharing some of the insights of the session with you, and we hope that this will encourage you to participate in this research project for the benefit of the entire Indian pharma industry, because to all those who participate, we will be giving you a comprehensive report that will help you to gain the insights and craft your digital strategy going forwards. So over to you, Deep. Look forward to yet another wonderful session. Thank you.
COVID-19 pandemic has prompted drastic changes in the marketing world last few months, and pharmaceutical marketeers has not been excluded from this evolution. Faced with the fear of COVID infection, patients are uncertain of what to do and are not seeing their doctors. The physicians, mostly under-resourced and overwhelmed, are not seeing reps. Also, they have shifting their media preferences. Companies shrinking revenues. So, what is a smart pharmaceutical marketeers to do? The task is best summed up by words of English naturalist Charles Darwin. It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is most adaptable to change. Charles Darwin. Indian pharma will need to adapt the business practices that delivers treatment and services for the patient by increasing investment in digital technology and supply chain. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this very important discussion. So as a part of DEPA, we initiated this research project with a detailed survey to understand the current status of issues faced by Indian pharma companies in adopting digital to bridge the pharma and physician disconnect. Many of you have responded to this project, and I think that we are midway. This project is not finished yet. So hence, I will request you, the people, those who have not responded, please be part of this research project, and your input would be immense value to us. Pharma was fortunate to have possibly the least impact by this crisis. But the business impact varies tremendously. There are companies, and as the research also indicate, there are companies that who are impacted pretty badly. The other companies that was not so much, and some gain as well. So let's talk about that. What are the things that what happened? But before that, let's see that what is happening. And this is what that I shared with you some time back. So there's a two-part, the ZS research, we talked about the April 3rd week and the June 3rd week and the difference. The good news is that the patients are catching up and increase their in-person visit rates. But then protocol and the social distancing is creating that some kind of capacity constraint. And new diagnostics, especially that there's an 18% drop in the diagnosis rate, and we all know that which is possibly that uh, uh, we may have a long-term consequences of that. The other part that which is important, we'll talk about the switches, and especially the treatment approach. And there are plenty of doctors in point of fact that they are more cautious and indicating the preference for the standard of care versus the new approaches. So the treatment approach has shifted, and the pharma need to take a notice of this, because it may not be the business as usual. It's very different situation when it comes to that. So part two prescription has changed. Uh, the demand level remains volatile, though the good news is that last yesterday that we had September figures in, and we could see that there is a growth of about 4.5% in the month of September. But then I don't think that we can predict that now that those things are over. This October, November possibly that will tell us that the exact picture. But again, the good news is that it's actually showing a positive trend rather than the other months that there was a decline. Let's get back to the survey. We are very happy that we had about 237 respondents, and there's a very diverse mix of people. From the sales force size perspective, that we have seen uh, roughly about 44% of the companies have over 1,000 reps, and we also have the companies which is below 19% companies are below 100 reps, and all other in between. So you see that very diverse. All the therapeutic areas, we have considered about 12 to 13 therapeutic areas. So there's a very healthy mix. Also that there is a very healthy mix of people when we look at from Indian companies focusing on the domestic business, Indian companies focusing on both domestic and broad business, and the multinationals operating out in India. So equal numbers that we look at that. So idea is that how we get that very vast or very diverse views. Uh, so also when you look at that the companies by revenue. So roughly, if we look at that, half of the companies have over 1,000 crores as a turnover, but there are about 21% of the companies. Those also have that less than 100 crore turnover. So we asked that last 6 months, to what extent was your company's revenue impacted due to lockdown or clinics not operating or not operating full capacity, or the reps having a limited access to the doctor. So about 17% of the respondent talk about their company's revenue was impacted by over 50%. Now these are the companies basically that, if you really look at that, are from these areas. The small to mid-sized companies, and not much from the bigger companies where the revenue was impacted that much. And especially the companies where that there was not much efforts in terms of building the big brands. The big brands relatively were less impacted than the brands which was possibly that lesser known. The other aspect that when you look at that is uh, there are large number of respondents said their business was impacted anything between 10 to 50%. Right. So this is again that. So I must mention here the companies those who focus on building brands. They possibly that they were impacted, but not as much as possibly the companies those who focus more on the transactional, that sales model. there are about 8% of the companies reported that their sales increased by over 10%. Now, these are companies possibly that with a specific treatment, but these are also companies with the large Indian companies, one of the top 5 players in Indian market, and also that there are companies that which is a good chronic portfolio, a multinational with a solid chronic portfolio, did extremely well during this period. Let's look at the other. So this is interesting because we asked that what is the focus of your digital effort, and and I think that there are 5 responses. What we did was that we consolidated into these 3 responses, which are very important: improving the customer engagement, improving the commercial team engagement, and build commercial teams capability. Now let's look at each of these areas a little bit more detail and understand that what exactly that the respondent are talking about in this area. So when you talk about, I think that number one focus and where the large number of respondent, 205 out of 237, which is 86% of them said that the key focus of digitalization to improve the engagement with SCPs by improving the processes with a view to improve connectivity and strengthen the relationship primarily with SCPs, but also with patients and the other stakeholders. Now, very happy to look at this, and later that we will see that how their efforts are actually being responded and what they see that the effectiveness of these efforts. But at this point of time, keep in mind that I think that this is a focus of their effort. Improving commercial team engagement and efficiency. I think that again the very large number, about half of them, 53%, 127 respondent talk about that re-engineering the current processes and leveraging technology to drive reps engagement and align commercial team processes. I think that that's a wonderful point. They also gave example that deploying the digital technology to collate all the information required for SCP's engagement and harnessing structured and unstructured internal and external data to empower strategic insight to increase visibility into SCP's behavior to support more rapid and robust commercial decisions. I think that from the understanding and from the knowledge perspective, that's a wonderful insight if you really look at that very comprehensively put here, improving commercial teams' engagement and efficiency, how they are going to do that. And finally, they talk about that build the commercial team's capabilities through learning and development, which is about 44%, 99 respondent talks about focusing on this. They're talking about that they need to craft the talent strategies and develop their commercial teams' critical digital and cognitive capabilities, their social and emotional skills, and their adaptability and resilience. I think that if you notice or put an emphasis on these words, each word you can weigh in gold because these are very, very critical and very important and not very often spoken about. But I think that's very important. Now is the time for their companies to double down on their learning budgets, commit to reskilling. Developing this muscle will also strengthen companies' future disruption. This is a wonderful insight, and that's where that I find that there's a huge amount of people, those who have a solid knowledge and understanding in this area. But when we see the criticality of executing the strategy, we find that there is a very visible gaps here. So there is a gap when we talk about knowing versus doing. And that's what the next part that we're going to talk about. So we look at this important that the last 6 months, what are the channels being used to engage doctors? Okay, and as most of you would realize that most important channels using the smartphone or video calls or WhatsApp or call center or remote platform and things like that. And that's where the majority of people have done that. So 88% of the respondent or 203 respondent out of 237 have used this method to engage their customer, and they find it's not effective. So the average rating is 2.4. And later that we're going to talk about what customers are talking about this. Webinars, and I think that is also very largely being used. So 74%, about 171 respondents talk about webinar, and they find mix somewhat effective. So rating is slightly higher, 2.9, but not so great. Face-to-face call by reps, and I think that as we all expect, possibly that there's a 64% people use. Not all companies have now, allowed their reps to engage with the customers, but the 64% is on. And as expected, that is the most effective with a rating of 3.5 out of 5. So there are gaps that when you look at, and we talk about why these gaps are there. Then we talk about the emails generated by reps and supported by their marketing and medical teams and things like that. And I think that the 45% of the respondent, they use this to reach out to the doctors to engage, and they find that it's the least effective way. Remote conferences, CMEs, again that about 45% responded they use this to engage customer, and they find that somewhat effective, possibly as effective as webinars and things like that. Remote detailing platform, again that not many, but 34% of the respondent they have used, and they find that average 2.4 rating, so not so. Then there's very interesting talk about that the roundtable meet or a small group meet within the hospital and things like that. And surprisingly, that very low number of people have used this, and they find that after rep possibly that this is the effective way of engaging the SCBs. So when you look at this, there are plethora of things that the companies have currently used. Some are effective, some are not effective. So there's a big gap that when you look at that, how to make these are more effective. I think that for majority of companies, barring very few, majority of companies, these are all kind of quick fix solutions. So doctors stop seeing reps, or that lockdown, so use WhatsApp, and without really that looking at the other aspect and things like that. So that's where that we find uh, the customers are continued to be irritated by such things. So let's look at that, and I'm not saying they're very extensive. Let's look at some of the voice of the customer, where vocal voices, and then you will find that. So here is a Twitter poll, talking about that what should be done with medical reps who message you about their product or upcoming meetings at midnight just because you are seen online. So large number said that block them. Some said that give a piece of your mind. You can understand what the piece of that mind would be. Entertain them, very minuscule people, and escalate to their seniors. So I think that there is a very strong emotion, and we can't just ignore these. Okay. Uh, then here is a very interesting chain of conversation, and say that, oh yeah, they try and meet us in parking lot or the entrance of the gate, because some of the hospitals have restricted the entry of reps, so now they are gathering at the entrance of the gate. Okay. Um, Now this further says that you know that I was just having my dinner and a bloke called me thrice. I have given it to him beautifully. Hope it is recorded and they will listen to it again and again and again. I think that see the very strong emotion and what exactly that how this doctor might be feeling hurt about this, so that he has gone on social media on that. So you look at the SCP's engagement and you now look at that the internal team's engagement. And here's a conversation here. If any medical rep uh, resists the WhatsApp phone call to the doctor, his salary is deducted and disciplinary proceedings are started. Please ask your friend. And then there are a couple of companies. These are all well-known big companies. Okay, they have deducted salaries up to 50 days and issued warning letters. Okay, medical reps, and then again that there is a again well-known company observed a one-day All India strike 26 August against this practice, but management is going ahead with the app and threatening behavior. So why I said that there is a gap when you look at that knowing and doing. So here, there that you see that when we talk about the focus of digital efforts and the insights, it's a beautifully summarized, right? So they know exactly that what we need to do. Actually, that what is happening, there is a difference, and that is what that I thought possibly it would be nice to really look at that a little comprehensive roadmap to digital adoption. So let me take a few more minutes and talk about that the roadmap to digital adoption. Uh, Again, that we are not taking the too many points. We'll talk about the four important points, and here we are talking about you know from perspective that I think that it's important to understand that. So out of these 237 respondents, roughly about 24-25% are uh, business unit head and above, which means that the C-suite people. Okay, and if you further then analyze their data, their average experience is about 21 years. And if you look at from the digital definitions that digital natives or digital immigrants, most of them would fall into the digital immigrants, which means that they are adopting that. They're not born, in a digital era where that something comes very naturally to them, right? So it's very important to look at that how they understand the digital, right? The possibilities, and it's not that you have your strategy and now you're force fitting digital into it. Okay, let's do digital here, or the worst possibly it's a vendor driven. So the vendor comes with a proposal and say that okay, this is what it is, possibly we can do this, rather than possibly that you need to start with the zero base and look at your strategy completely, uh, right? uh, the other is that and that's where we talk about the align with the business strategy, which means that you also need to consider now that your customer needs and preferences are changing, undergoing a tremendous change, and the last 6-7 months has accelerated those things. So what way that now that you look at your strategy and things like that, and finally that you need to build a solid business case, and that really the sowing the seed of digital culture. We all know that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? And that's what that Mr. Hariram I know everybody talk about mindset and changing those, given the wonderful example of Professor Sumitra Ghoshal on that smell of the place. So it's very important to build that business case. And finally, that unless that you have that capabilities, so what you can do to build the capabilities where the people are comfortable carrying out those things becomes much more important. So how do you focus on? Let's spend a little bit more time on each of these elements and how these elements impact. So when we talk about the understanding possibilities offered by the digital future, um, reimagining possibilities and the future business model transformation due to digital initiatives. What is needed is a well thought strategy touching all aspects of business practices and processes, which means that if you want to improve SCP's engagement, it's not only about the SCP's engagement, but you also need to look at that how your internal teams are engaged, how the HR processes, whether it is hiring, onboarding, PMS, um, training and development, learning management systems, sales enablement, marketing automation, business analytics, this all need to undergo a tremendous shift. So it's not about that siloed working or that I'm working on only this. You need to look at that all other associated processes as well. So, and that's where that pharma leaders need to constantly demonstrate and reinforce their personal commitment to digital transformation, which becomes very important. Uh, the second aspect is that how the pharma leaders drive and embrace this cultural change by aligning and integrating into the business strategies. So leadership need to drive and embrace the cultural change that digital transformation brings, which means continuously, how we can see, understand, assess that the changing SCP's needs and expectation from pharma companies, their preferences and preferred channel for engagement. And what is more important is that how we adopt those technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning that can provide help in decoding their behaviors and insight into the business intelligence. And those are the critical element, and then that's part of how these things can be aligned. And that is where what is needed is that how you build that strong business case, and that understand and scope the digital transformation. Once the leaders understand and scope the digital transformation and the benefit of digitalization, they need to clearly define and communicate the benefit delivering from that across the entire organization, and which is very important in terms of building the right climate and the culture for that. Okay, announcing very publicly that they are spending massive resources to transform business practices, embedding digital transformation. This will go a long way to not only promote buying in, and early buying in is very important, to the overall program, but also sow the seed of a digital culture. Finally, what and I think that the most critical probably is that how do you build strong digital capabilities and talent. Now, it's important, to increase the likelihood of success of digitalization effort. Leaders rapidly need to assess and identify the competency needed for digital transformation. Now, what's important is that I don't think that any company can do it alone, which means what? That you need to assess that what can be leveraged from external expertise. Everything you can't build of your own, and what they need to develop in-house capabilities to reap the full benefit of digital transformation, organizations need to invest in improving their capabilities, data integrity, standardization, timeliness, and accessibilities. Now, as I said that these are the 4 points, but this is not all. And I guess that something that always back of my mind is that due to this, there are other kind of transformation also happening, and we must need to keep in mind uh, that we need to repurpose some of the roles because some of the traditional roles may not continue, right? And if we want that everybody to take the fiery who, that might not be possible, and we would be putting it too much of time and resources uh, and may not get success. So that's something that which is important. What I mean is that to support the digital initiative or digital efforts, you need to repurpose some of the roles and really provide the structural alignment that support the digital initiatives. Uh, and that's important, and that's what we talk about, that the past experiences, past knowledge, past success, past legacy, uh, not everything would be very important, right? So there may be a greater need for repurposing some roles, especially the customer facing roles, marketing roles, business analytics. According to the pharma, leaders may consider realigning reporting structure to completely support the digital efforts. The right model will need to be aligned with their organization's unique cultural context. And that's something that is important uh, when you really, really, shift to a very different way of operating. Thank you very much for your patient listening. I hope that you find this preview, some points useful. Thank you very much and wonderful week ahead.